If you're shooting with an APS-C DSLR or any one of several mirrorless cameras like Sony E-mount or Micro Four Thirds cameras, Rokinon just rolled out some new affordable wide-angle glass you should know about. We'll look at 3 new lenses today. Hi, I'm Larry Becker. You're looking at an all-new 10mm lens, an all-new 12mm lens, and a newly updated 8mm fisheye lens, all from the folks at Rokinon. The reason people are so excited about these lenses is because they're fast, wide-angle primes at price points below what you might expect. First, let me tell you about all these lenses overall, and then we'll get to each one by one. These are all photography lenses with focus and aperture dials intended for still photography. Sure, you can shoot video with these lenses, but Rokinon has a wide selection of cine lenses specifically designed for video. Their cine lenses have declicked aperture rings and the standard 0.8 pitch gearing on both control dials. These lenses are still photo cousins. Each lens is available for a number of mounts and will work with APS-C size sensors, and 2 of the 3 will also work with Micro Four Thirds systems. Both aperture and focus controls are completely manual with every mount option for these lenses. So that means that you'll need to be proficient adjusting your camera settings to capture a good exposure. I found each of these 3 lenses to deliver good, color-accurate images with minimal chromatic aberration, and it was usually near the outer areas of the image with high contrast elements, which isn't unusual and it happens with quite a few lenses. I shot all my images in RAW format as well as JPEG, so before applying lens correction, the chromatic aberration was noticeable, as you would expect. In-camera JPEG processing almost completely eliminated the issue, and of course, RAW processing easily knocked it out too. Detail across the image area for each of these lenses was consistent. The images all had good contrast and were reasonably sharp throughout the frame. Now, a minute ago I mentioned that you need to know your camera in order to set it properly for use with these manual lenses. If full manual operation is new to you, it might help to have a few examples so you know what to expect. I tested 3 lenses, each with a different mount, so I needed to use 3 different cameras. With the Sony mirrorless E-mount camera, I needed to enable a menu setting called Release Shutter without lens, or it wouldn't let the shutter release happen. By default, Sony NEX cameras and the new A6000 I was using expect an electronic communication with the lens. Another issue is that the A6000 I was using didn't allow me to digitally zoom my image preview. So I checked my focus by enabling the focus peaking option. The Olympus EPL5 mirrorless camera I used to test the Micro Four Thirds mount lens didn't have focus peaking or a viewfinder, but I could easily zoom the LCD preview and focus accurately that way. I also tested a Canon EF mount lens and I used digital zooming of the live view image to confirm my focus. An interesting note here. While these lenses are not intended for full-frame bodies, the Canon DSLR mount is an EF mount, not an EFS, so you aren't prohibited from mounting it on a full-frame Canon body. So I broke the rules and snapped some test shots with my 6D. It turns out that only the center portion of the image frame was usable, about a 10 megapixel area in the middle of my 20.2 megapixel capture, but it did work. Now, let's have a look at each of these lenses individually. First up, there's a 10mm f2.8 ED/AS NCS CS, and the lens I tested had the Canon EF mount. Now, besides a little goofing off I told you about with my full-frame 6D, I did my real testing on a 70D. This lens is also available with mounts for Nikon F, Sony A-mount, Sony E-mount, Canon EF-M, Fujifilm X, Samsung NX, and Micro Four Thirds. And of course, there's going to be a slightly different crop factor with these various systems, so the lens will be a 35mm equivalent to using a 15mm to 20mm lens, depending on your mount. The setup I tested was a 16mm equivalent field of view. This 10mm lens has 14 elements in 9 groups. It weighs 1.3 to 1.4 pounds, depending on the mount. It's a nice size, and the controls feel good with just the right amount of resistance and travel. I found the focus of my finished images to be best with subjects in the foreground, and landscape image elements were just a little soft in the infinity range. Still, definitely usable. And considering that you've never been able to get a lens with this focal length and an f2.8 aperture on an APS-C size sensor before, it's a wonderful new option for shooting wide. The lens is obviously great for landscapes and architecture with very limited geometric distortion for keeping those vertical lines straight. One final note is that there is a nanocrystal anti-reflection coating on one of the inside lens elements to reduce ghosting and flare while maintaining even light transmission. As you can see with the sun in the frame of this test image, I still got some lens flare in my image, but it was surprisingly little considering the position of the sun in the frame. The other all-new lens of the three I tested was the 12mm f2 NCS CS with a micro 4/3 mount. I tested this on the Olympus EPL5 and I was really happy with the performance. This lens also is available with the Canon EF-M, Fujifilm X mount, Samsung NX, Sony E mount, and micro 4/3 mount versions. So you can see that there's no DSLR mount option here, just mirrorless. Depending on the mount you're using, your 35mm focal length equivalent will be from 18mm to 24mm. Since I was using a micro 4/3 camera, I had a 24mm equivalent field of view. This lens has 12 elements in 10 groups, and that nanocrystal coating is on the inside of the front 2 lens elements instead of just 1. Another difference is that this lens has a 67mm diameter thread so that it can accept front filters. One of the nice things about this lens is that f2 maximum aperture. It gives mirrorless camera owners an improved capability for capturing low light shots as well as some shallow depth of field shots that have been out of reach in the past. In my experience, this lens was just a little bit sharper than the 10mm lens I tested, and it gave me great results. The third lens I tested was the second generation 8mm f2.8 UMC fisheye 2 lens with the Sony mount system. I tested it on the new A6000. The other available mounts are Canon EF-M, Fujifilm X, and the Samsung NX. Again, keeping things to mirrorless only and no DSLR mounts are offered. The lens has 11 elements in 8 groups, including 2 aspherical and 3 ED elements, and features an ultra multi-coating for reducing lens flare and ghosting. There's no nano coating here, however. And the 35mm focal length equivalent is 12.8mm for the Canon APS-C bodies, or 12mm for all the other APS-C equipped mirrorless cameras. As you'd expect with a fisheye lens, fitting a 180-degree angle of view into an APS-C image area means that you're gonna have some geometric distortion, and it's the kind that looks great. I love a good fisheye lens for things like stadiums and other wide subjects, and this lens performs nicely. When I think of a 24-megapixel fisheye image, I usually think that you must be using a camera and lens far bigger than this, which you can easily slip into a big pocket. One of the great things about photography these days is all the lens options that let us do the more creative, artistic things. Wide-angle lenses with fast apertures have always been great for certain kinds of shooting, and now these 3 new, affordable Rokinon lenses mean that enthusiasts will have even more options without needing to step up to a full-frame DSLR. For B&H and Kelby One, I'm Larry Becker. Thanks for watching.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.
Scott Kelby here, and welcome to this quick tour of our online training. We have hundreds of online classes for you covering everything from lighting to landscape photography. From portrait photography to sports, we have classes on wedding, automotive photography, shooting, food, fashion, travel, you name it. The most incredible part of this is the price. You get all of this for just $199 a year, or you can pay monthly for just $24.95. 24-hour a day, 7-day a week access from anywhere in the world. I invite you to join with us today and start learning right now.